A new warning tonight about the scope of a massive cyber attack.
Already believed to be the largest cyber attack on our government.
America under virtual invasion.
The COVID-19 pandemic has shaken our economies and societies to the core and shown us how vulnerable we are to biological threats. In the digital world, similar risks are being overlooked right now. A cyber attack with COVID-like characteristics would spread faster and further than any biological virus.
German lawmakers got a furious reaction for suggesting COVID restrictions could be the template for fighting climate change. Karl Lauterbach sent out his views in an opinion piece for a newspaper.
There will never be a vaccine against CO2, so we need measures for tackling climate change that are similar to the restrictions of personal freedom in the pandemic.
They want control over almost every aspect of your life.
We can't drive our SUVs and, eat as much as we want and keep our homes on, 72 degrees at all times.
In the same way that we have taxed cigarettes, we're going to have to tax carbon.
We have to take combustion engine vehicles off the road as rapidly as we can.
Would you support changing the dietary guidelines?
Yes.
Reduce red meat specifically?
Yes, I would.
If there is a silver lining to this crisis, it's visible in the skies above China.
All of this inaction, while causing so many humans problems, has actually proven to be quite good for Mother Earth.
Falling pollution levels brought about by lockdowns may have been shining an impact on sunshine.
Wild animals are now roaming city streets.
How do we make sure these pollution levels don't rebound?
The virus can live on surfaces, for example, steel and plastic for up to 3 days. We're just going to clean all the virus off here. Don't need to do too much. It's a pretty sensitive virus. For cardboard, it's typically going to be closer to 24 hours.
In Milan, they're pushing cars out of there with bike and pedestrian lanes. Fuel taxes are being jacked up all over the UK and Europe. And France is moving to ban all short-haul domestic flights.
When a previous report projected emissions would have to drop by 45% to meet the Paris Agreement. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said the report is a red alert for our planet, adding the governments are nowhere close to the level of ambition required to meet the agreement's goals. According to data from the International Energy Agency released this week, global carbon dioxide emissions have already rebounded to pre-pandemic levels. Global lockdown every 2 years needed to meet Paris CO2 goals. Study, The Guardian. Global carbon emissions bounce back to pre-pandemic levels. Forbes report, drop in greenhouse gas emissions amid COVID-19 pandemic fails to slow climate crisis. The world has to cut carbon emissions by 45% under Paris Agreement, but is only on track for a less than 1% decline.
Well, I did a talk in 2015, well in advance, saying we're not ready for the pandemic. Then as it came, almost identical to the scenario I painted in that TED Talk, we started investing, and our goal was to take our partners, particularly in India, people like Serum Institute and BioE, and get the vaccines being made by the Western companies into those factories without any royalties. I gave a TED Talk on climate in 2010, and then I gave the pandemic one in 2015. So these are two areas that I've been learning and thinking a lot about.
So those two TED Talks, one on a coming pandemic and one on a climate disaster, and look where we are. Please do not give any more TED Talks. But seriously, the worry is, and there's a kind of parallel between this kind of virus pandemic disaster and a climate disaster.
For this pandemic, we're having to do it without having practiced, and it's kind of hard, but we're working on that. For the next pandemic, we'll make sure there's more factory capacity, and we'll actually practice how do you transfer these things, how do you make it. It took a year, which was pretty good, but if we improve the science, we should be able to do it in 3 or 4 months for the next pandemic.